All right, in addition to knowing how to classify and name polynomials by term and by degree, you will have to know how to multiply and divide them, because we've already talked about the adding and subtracting in terms of combining like terms. All right, so multiplying and dividing are going to be the last things that we take on in this chapter. Multiplying has a bunch of different pieces to it because there's all different kinds of polynomials that you're going to be multiplying together. So in these notes, I'm going to plan on trying to give you enough examples and support to help you be able to do any type of multiplying polynomials you may have to do. All right, so the first one is to treat all problems like distributing and keep your answers in descending order by degree, which every polynomial you ever write should always be in that kind of order. All right, so if you look at the first one, if I have a binomial of 4x plus 7, and it's multiplied by a monomial of negative 2x. This is your normal standard distributive problem. Take the smaller one and give it to everybody in the larger one. So I'm going to take negative 2x and multiply 4x. Now here's where your exponent rules kick in. Negative 2 times 4 is negative 8, but when you go to do an x times an x, that creates an x squared. So you will be changing exponents when you are multiplying terms together. Right? Now I take the negative 2x and I give it to the positive 7. Negative 2 times positive 7 is negative 14, and because it had an x, I have to keep the x. And if you notice, my answer is already in the right order, so I don't need to rearrange anything. If it were in the incorrect order, we would have to rearrange to make it correct. All right, so here's another one where I have a monomial, and I am multiplying times a trinomial this time. 3x squared plus 2x minus 6. Right? Again, take the monomial and give it to everybody in the trinomial. So negative 4x squared times 3x squared. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. X squared times x squared should make x to the 4th. Remember, you're combining your exponents together. Right? Then we take negative 4x squared and go to the middle. Negative 4 times positive 2 is a negative 8. X squared times x gives you x to the 3rd power. And then I take negative 4x squared and go to the 6 in the back, the negative 6. Negative 4 times negative 6 is a positive 24. And because I had x squared in the first initial one, I need to have x squared in my last term. And if you look at your exponents, they are in order from highest to lowest. So we do not need to worry about the order. Right? So that's the trick with monomials times anything. Just treat it like distributing. Right? The second type of multiplying you're going to have has its own special name. Right? This is where you're going to multiply two binomials together. And this is the only time you can use this. Do not try to use this with any other type of polynomials other than two binomials. All right, so to multiply two binomials, you're going to use a pattern called FOIL. F-O-I-L. Please make sure you know how to spell FOIL. I've seen students mess it up because of that. All right, and each one of those letters is an acronym, so they stand for a different piece of the process. Right, so I'm going to show you what this is, and I guarantee you that if you go and you ask any of your parents or any of the adults that you live around or have been around, that they could probably tell you what FOIL stands for as well. Right, the F stands for first, the O stands for outer, like outside, the I stands for inner, like inside, and the L stands for last. So it's first, outer, inner, last. Right, and that's the way you're going to go through and multiply these binomials together. All right, so we're going to do a couple of different variations of this just to make sure you can follow with me and so that you understand what's going on. All right, so I'm going to take 2x plus 3 as one of my binomials and x plus 1 as my other one. I'm going to label this first one just so you can see where the F, the O, the I, and the L come from, but then after that I'm not going to label them each time. I'm only going to draw the arrows. All right, so if I take the first term in each parentheses, the 2x and the x, that is my F. That's my first. So 2x times x gives me 2x squared. Now to get my outer, that would be the two end pieces of your binomials, your outside pieces. So that would be the 2x and the 1. So that would be my O. 2x times 1 is positive 2x. Then I want to do the inner, which would be the two innermost pieces. That's positive 3 and x. So there's my I. 3 times x is going to be positive 3x. And then last will be the last term in each binomial, which would be the positive 3 times the positive 1. and that would be my L. So 3 times 1 is positive 3. Now when you get to this point, you are going to have to notice that in the middle, you've got some combining to do. You cannot leave me with separate pieces that can combine together, so you need to simplify it a little bit more. And 90% of the time, the middle can combine, but there are those few chances where the middle doesn't combine, and we'll talk about those as we come across them. So the final answer for this example would be 2x squared plus 5x plus 3. So you're going to end up for a trinomial for this problem, and most of the problems, they'll end up being trinomials, but every now and then binomials and others sneak in, and you have to be able to deal with them. All right, so let's do another one and see if you're catching on. All right, so for the next one, if I take y minus 2 times y minus 3, again, it's first, outer, inner, last. So y times y is y squared, y times negative 3 is negative 3y, negative 2 times y is negative 2y, and negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6. Again, combine the middle together, so your final answer is y squared minus 5y plus 6. All right, for the next one, they do write them a little differently. Okay, if you see this, then that means that whatever that binomial is in parentheses, there are 2 of them. So you actually need to stretch it out or rewrite it so that you can do the FOIL. This 2k minus 4 squared means the same as 2k minus 4 times 2k minus 4. And you can see by doing that that FOIL is going to be very easy to do. But if you don't ever stretch it out or rewrite it so that it looks the way it's supposed to, then you're not going to be able to get the FOIL to come out the way you want it to. All right, so 2k times 2k gives you 4k squared. 2k times negative 4 is negative 8k. Negative 4 times 2k is negative 8k. And negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. Again, you're going to combine the middle. Okay, so negative 8 minus 8 more is going to give you a negative 16 in the middle. So 4k squared minus 16k plus 16 will be your final answer off of this one. So do make sure that you stretch it out and that you write it in a way that you're going to be able to use FOIL to your advantage. All right, this next example that I'm going to show you is still going to use FOIL, but it's also going to tie in the geometry that you're going to need to be able to use next year in geometry class. And this is why we do what we do in here first. All right, they're going to give you a picture, and in this case it's a rectangle, and they're going to give you dimensions on the rectangle, and the dimensions are going to be binomials. So I've given you the length and the width written as binomials each. And then the directions are going to ask you to find the area of this rectangle. Right? Now you should be able to recall from your pre-algebra days that the area formula for a rectangle is length times width. Right? And if we take these binomials and we put them together, it's going to look exactly like your FOIL pattern. X plus 3 is one binomial times 2x minus 4 is the other one. And now you just jump in and do the FOIL that you've been practicing with. X times 2x is 2x squared. X times negative 4 is negative 4x. 3 times 2x is positive 6x, and 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. You want to combine the middle. Don't forget to grab that negative sign. Okay, so we have 2x squared plus 2x minus 12. And that's the expression for the area of this rectangle. You don't need to know what x is, nor do we really care at this point what x is. It's the matter of, can you come up with the expression that is representing the area of the problem. All right, so that's when you have 2 binomials that FOIL is used. All right, well, what if we don't have 2 binomials? What if we have to multiply a binomial by a trinomial or polynomial? In other words, something that has 3 or more terms to it. But one of the parentheses is going to be a binomial. The other one is going to be 3 or more. All right, so in order to do that, you're going to multiply each term by each term of the other polynomial. And simplify. These are much longer answers because your polynomial that you're dealing with is going to be much longer. All right, so I'm only going to show you a couple of these just because of the length of them and because you only have to be familiar with a couple of them. All right, so if we take a look at this next one, if I give you k plus 4 times k squared plus 3 minus 2k, I have given you a binomial times a trinomial. FOIL will not work, regular distributing will not work, right? But you can kind of use regular distributing to get you through it. Start with the smaller one and go to the larger one. So I'm going from k plus 4 to the other one. And I'm going to take each term separately and distribute. And then I'm going to come back and grab the other one. Right? So I'll switch colors, that way you can see what I'm doing. If I take k times k squared, I get k to the third power. K times 3 gives me plus 3k. K times negative 2k gives me negative 2k squared. All right, so I'm done with the k, but now I've got to come back and get the 4 and distribute it to everybody. So 4 times k squared is 4k squared. 4 times 3 is positive 12, and 4 times negative 2k is negative 8k. Now that you've got this big old long stretch of stuff, you need to combine like terms and put them in order from highest power to lowest power. All right, so as I go through this, I see that k to the third power is my highest one. Nobody goes with it, so my answer must start k cubed. Then I go to k squareds. I've got a negative 2k squared right here and a positive 4k squared right here. I need to combine those. Negative 2 plus 4 is positive 2k squared. Then I go to my single k's. I've got a positive 3k right here, and I've got a negative 8k right here. So 3 minus 8 is going to give me negative 5k. And then my constant that I only have one of is this plus 12, so it's going to go in the back as plus 12. So your final answer is a polynomial, but the only way you're going to get that is by distributing each term to everybody and then simplifying. Right? So the next thing we want to do is take a look at some special patterns that exist. These are known as the special product patterns. And you'll see why they're special. They actually have a memory trick that if you're willing to learn it and memorize it and commit it to memory, then you don't need to do any kind of work. You can just jump straight to the answer because you know the trick behind it. But if you don't, you can always have a backup plan as FOIL. FOIL will always work for these special ones. Right? But I do want to introduce you to them just in case you do feel like you can memorize them and want to memorize them. Right? You're going to find that they actually come out better and easier if you do memorize them. All right, the first one is called a sum and difference pattern, which means that it involves addition and subtraction. Okay? And these can only be done with two binomials, so do not try them on anything else. Right? Here's what this one looks like. The sum and difference pattern is going to be where you take a binomial of the same two pieces, but the only thing that's different is the sign in the middle. One of them will have a plus sign, or one will have the minus sign. Everything else is identical to it. So it's a plus b and a minus b. After you get done doing FOIL and you try to combine the middle, you end up with a squared minus b squared as your final answer. So the middle actually disappears, right? And the reason it does that is because one was positive and one was negative of the same type, right? So you just end up with a front term and a back term, right? So this is the only time where you get a binomial off of this. The trick to it and the shortcut is to, when you see this happening, just take the first one and square it, take the second one and square it, and slap a minus sign in the middle of it, right? So here's a couple of examples that go along with this one. If I have 3x plus 2 and 3x minus 2, yes, I could do FOIL, and yes, it will come out correctly. It just takes you a few more minutes to do this. But if you know that this is one of the special patterns and you know the trick to it, you can take the 3x and multiply by the 3x. So 3x times 3x is 9x squared. And then you can take the plus 2 and the minus 2 and multiply those together. 2 times negative 2 is going to be minus 4. And you're done. Right? So that only works, though, if the terms are exactly the same except for the plus and minus sign. Right? Otherwise, you will have to do FOIL to make sure that you're getting the right answers. Okay, so here's another one. If we have x plus 5 and an x minus 5, I can tell that the only thing that's different between these two binomials is the plus and minus sign, so I know this is a special pattern. X times x is x squared. 5 times 5 is going to be 25, and you will always have a minus sign in the middle. Right? You'll never have anything else. Right? And we'll talk more about why that is and what we need to do with that in another chapter, but for right now, just understand that it will always be a minus sign. Right? And then the last one that we'll practice under this part before I show you the other pattern is if I have x plus 2y and x minus 2y. Again, I see the exact same binomials except for the sign. So I'm going to take x times x and get x squared. I'm going to take 2y times 2y and get 4y squared. And because I know that it's a positive times a negative, I know I have to have that minus sign in there. Right? So if you recognize this trick, then use it. There's nothing wrong with it. If you don't recognize it, use FOIL as your backup plan because you're going to get really good at FOIL. And know that that'll come out the same way as well. Right, the second memory trick pattern, right, is a little trickier for the memory, but if you can figure out what it's supposed to be, then you're all right. It's called the square of a binomial. And there's two different versions of this, and this is probably why most students don't remember this one as well, right? It's because it looks different. If I have a plus b squared, where it's one binomial with a square on the outside, then my final answer is always going to be a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. If you did FOIL, this is what you would end up with. Right? If I have a minus b in parentheses squared, then the only difference is going to be that first sign. It's going to say a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. Right, so the pattern is still the same except for that first sign. If there's a plus in the parentheses, you need plus plus in your final answers. If there's a minus in the parentheses, you need minus plus in your final answers. Right, so let's see if we can figure out how to make this work for us. Here's what the first one looks like. If I have 3x minus 2 squared. I'm actually going to fill in my signs first. Because I see a minus sign in between my binomial, I know that I'm going to have something in front, minus something in the middle, plus something in the back. I already know what my signs are going to be. Right now, I can get the first and the last one the quickest because 3x squared is going to be 9x squared. Or 3x times 3x is 9x squared. Then in the back, 2 times 2, or 2 squared, is going to be the plus 4. The trick is getting the middle, right? And this is where most students have some difficulty. If you take 3x times 2, ignore the sign in the middle and don't worry about the positive or negative aspect of it. If you take 3x times 2, that gives you 6x. If I double 6x, in other words 6x plus 6x, I get 12x. That's what goes in the middle. So if you can train yourself to multiply the two together and then double that answer, you will always be able to get the middle. And if you did FOIL with this, you would get the exact same answer that I have on the screen. All right, so let's try one more. Actually, let's do two more and see if you're able to follow along with me. All right, so I have a plus sign in the middle, so I know that in my final answer I'm going to have a plus in the front and a plus in the back. Right now I'm going to do the easiest part first, which is squaring the front and squaring the back. So 7y times 7y is going to give me 49y squared. 2 times 2, or 2 squared, is going to give me a 4 in the back. That's the easiest part. All right, now to get the middle, 7y times 2 is 14y. And then I'm going to add another 14y because I'm going to double it. That gives me 28y. So in the middle, I have positive 28y sitting there. If you do your signs first, you don't ever have to worry about whether it's supposed to be positive or negative because it automatically works itself out because you've already taken care of that. All right, last one of this type. If we have 5p minus 6 squared, right? Again, I see a minus sign. That tells me I'm going to have a minus in the front and a plus in the back. Right? So I'm going to square my first ones. 5p times 5p is going to give me 25p squared. 6 times 6 is going to give me a back number of 36. Now to get my middle, I'm going to do 5p times 6, which is 30p. And I'm going to double 30p and get 60p. So in the middle, I have 60p. Right, so I want you to practice with some of these memory tricks. If you don't memorize them and you don't learn them, then fallback plan is FOIL, and that is your only fallback plan. So please know FOIL really well. Other than that, try and learn some of these memory tricks and save yourself some time. It is worth it, and it is more efficient, and it will get you through things a lot faster.